Backpacking through nature is supposed to be peaceful and escape from the chaos of everyday life. Out here the world feels distant, the air cleansed, and the silence almost sacred. But sometimes, the wilderness has other plans. When you venture deep into the unknown, there are things waiting for you in the shadows, things you can't explain, things you can't see but you can feel. Today we're diving into two terrifying backpacking stories, both real, both disturbing, and both guaranteed to make you think twice before your next hike. These stories aren't urban legends. They happened to real people. And after hearing what they went through, you might never look at the woods the same way again. It was late September when a group of 3 friends, Jake, Melissa, and Darren, set off for a weekend trek in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. The area was known for its dense pine forests, endless rain, and miles of trails that twisted like veins through the wilderness. They were experienced hikers. They knew the dangers, bears, cougars, the occasional landslide, but nothing could have prepared them for what they would encounter on this trip. The first day was uneventful. The trio made good time, laughing and sharing stories as they followed a seldom-used trail that wound its way deep into the forest. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, the only sounds their boots crunching on damp leaves and the distant calls of birds. By late afternoon, they found a clearing and set up camp. As dusk settled in, a thick fog rolled between the trees, turning the forest into a wall of shifting gray. That night, as they sat around the campfire, Melissa remarked how the woods felt off. It wasn't just the fog, she felt like something was watching them, just beyond the circle of light. Darren laughed it off, tossing another log on the fire. "It's just your imagination," he said. But Jake, who'd grown up hiking these woods, looked uneasy. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the forest isn't empty." They turned in early, zipping their tents tightly against the damp chill. The forest was silent except for the occasional drip of water from the trees. Sometime after midnight, Jake was jolted awake by a sound, something crunching softly outside his tent. He held his breath, straining to listen. At first, he thought it might be a deer, but then he heard a low, guttural breathing. Slow and deliberate, not like any animal he'd ever heard. Trying not to panic, Jake unzipped his tent just enough to peek outside. The fog was so thick he could barely see a foot in front of him, but then, just beyond the edge of the firelight, 2 faint yellow eyes flickered in the darkness. They blinked, once, slowly, and then disappeared. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. He zipped the tent shut and lay awake, listening as the breathing faded into the distance. The next morning, Jake told Melissa and Darren what he'd seen. Darren was skeptical, but Melissa's face went pale. She admitted she'd had a nightmare about eyes watching her from the trees. They tried to shake off the unease, packing up camp and pushing deeper down the trail, but the sense of being watched never left them. Every so often they would stop and look back, convinced they'd heard footsteps trailing behind. Around midday the path narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. The trees grew denser, blotting out the sunlight, and the fog seemed to cling to their skin. That's when Melissa stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. The others froze, listening. At first there was nothing. Then, a faint whispering like wind through the branches, but the air was still. The sound grew louder, almost like voices, though they couldn't make out any words. Suddenly Darren screamed. Something had brushed against his shoulder. A cold, clammy touch that left a wet smear on his jacket. He spun around, but there was nothing there, just trees and mist. "We need to get out of here," Melissa said, her voice shaking. They quickened their pace, not even stopping for lunch. By late afternoon the trail forked. One path led back toward the main road, the other deeper into the forest. As they debated which way to go, they noticed something odd. Scratched into the bark of a tree at the fork was a crude, human-like eye. It looked fresh. The bark around it was still oozing sap. Darren took a photo, but the instant he looked at it on his phone, the screen glitched, flickered, and shut off. The battery was dead, a brand new phone, fully charged that morning. They chose the path toward the road, moving as quickly as they could. But as night fell, it became clear they were lost. The fog thickened, muffling every sound. They set up a desperate camp, building a fire even though they were nearly out of matches. The night was eerily quiet. No birds, no insects, just the crackle of the fire and their own anxious breathing. Around midnight, Melissa woke to the sound of whispering. At first, she thought it was a dream, but then she realized the voices were coming from all around the camp. She poked her head out and saw dozens of yellow eyes glinting in the darkness, circling their camp. She screamed, waking the others. The eyes blinked in unison, then slowly retreated into the fog. Terrified, they huddled together until sunrise. When daylight finally broke, the forest looked normal. No eyes, no footprints, nothing out of place. They found the path and hiked out in silence, not daring to look back. When they finally reached their car, they vowed never to speak of what happened. To this day, Jake, Melissa, and Darren refused to hike in those woods. The photo of the eye was gone from Darren's phone, as if it had never existed. But sometimes, late at night, Jake swears he can still hear that whispering, soft, insistent, just beyond the edge of sleep. In the remote wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains, there's a section of trail so rarely used that even the park rangers warn hikers to steer clear. It's overgrown, prone to sudden landslides, and the weather can turn on a dime. But for a pair of seasoned backpackers, Emma and Cole, that was exactly the appeal. They wanted solitude, adventure, and a story to tell. What they got was far more than they bargained for. Emma and Cole started their trek early, eager to beat the forecasted storm. The first few miles passed quickly. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sounds the distant rush of a stream and their own footsteps. By midday, they reached a narrow valley shrouded in mist, where the trail all but disappeared beneath a tangle of fallen branches and mossy stones. They pressed on, using a compass to check their bearings. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The tree canopy overhead was so thick it blocked out the sun, casting everything in a greenish twilight. After hours of bushwhacking, they finally found a small clearing and set up camp. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. As dusk settled in, Emma noticed something strange. There were no animal sounds, no birds, no insects, nothing. "It's like the forest is holding its breath," she whispered. Cole shrugged it off, but even he seemed uneasy. They cooked a quick dinner and crawled into their tent, exhausted. Sometime after midnight, the storm hit. Rain hammered the tent, lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled through the valley. Emma barely slept, jolted awake by every crack of thunder. At one point she thought she heard voices outside, low, urgent, impossible to understand. She convinced herself it was just the wind. When they emerged the next morning, the forest looked transformed. The trail was gone, erased by the rain. Their footprints had vanished as if they'd never been there. Cole tried to use the compass, but the needle spun wildly, refusing to settle. That's when Emma noticed something even stranger. Their camp looked different. Their tent, their packs, even the fire ring they'd built the night before were gone, replaced by a patch of untouched moss. They searched frantically, calling out for help, but the woods swallowed their voices. It was as if they had stepped into another place, a place where nothing they'd brought with them existed. Emma started to cry, convinced they were lost or worse, that they'd never make it out. Hours passed as they wandered in circles. The fog thickened, and the forest grew darker, colder. They stumbled upon a massive tree with strange markings carved into its trunk, symbols neither of them recognized, arranged in a spiral. As they examined the markings, a chill swept through the air. Cole reached out to touch the tree, but Emma grabbed his arm, pulling him away. Suddenly, in the distance, they heard the faint sound of laughter, children's laughter, echoing through the fog. It grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be all around them. They ran, desperate to escape, but no matter which way they turned, the laughter followed. Eventually, they burst into another clearing, this one eerily familiar. It was their original campsite, but everything was back in place, exactly as they'd left it. Tent, packs, fire ring, all there, dry and untouched. The only thing missing was the time. According to their watches, it was still the previous evening, before the storm had even started. Shaken and terrified, Emma and Cole packed up their gear and fled the forest, following the compass as best they could. When they finally reached the trailhead, they were soaked, muddy, and disoriented. They told their story to a ranger who listened quietly before saying, "That part of the forest, it's best left alone." Emma and Cole never returned to the Appalachian wilderness. To this day they're haunted by what happened, the missing hours, the vanishing camp, the laughter in the fog. Sometimes when a storm rolls in, Emma swears she can hear voices whispering her name, calling her back to that lost place in the woods. As the footage fades to black, the only sounds left are the haunting wind and the creak of old trees. Whether it's something watching you in the woods, or something waiting, the wilderness has its secrets. These were just 2 stories, but there are more. Every year hikers and backpackers venture into the unknown, seeking peace or adventure, only to find something else entirely. Maybe it's a feeling you can't shake, a shadow you can't explain, or a moment when the forest itself seems to breathe. Whatever it is, It's out there, and it's waiting for the next camper bold enough to stray from the beaten path. If you want more terrifying backpacking tales, hit like, subscribe, and let us know your scariest outdoor experience in the comments below. Until next time, stay on the trail.